Good evening and welcome. I'm so excited for our first ever Women in Tech webinar. Welcome to this, hopefully not as grey as it is here day, for the very special What the Heck Do I Write on My CV and What the Heck Do I Do for my interviews. So we're going to welcome our panel. First we have Michelle O'Rourke. She is a tech recruiter at Woodrow Mercer. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have Jane Fallon, who is Head of Digital at Methods. Thank you as well for joining us.
Hello.
We also have Matt Rose, who is Technical Support Engineer at GitHub, and he is a coach at Codebar, which you should really check out when you can. And we have Georgie Kemp, who is an SEO executive at Impression. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us again. And I just want a quick admin for you guys. If you wouldn't mind heeding to our code of conduct for this meeting, we'd really appreciate it. No rude words would be lovely, or we will chuck you out. But pets, kids, you name it, are all very welcome. So thank you. And if you have any questions at all, please leave a comment for us on YouTube and we will answer them when we can. So I suppose we should just kick straight off, really. So to our panel, I give you probably one of the most basic and yet important questions I will probably ever ask you. What is the number one thing you look for in a CV? Whoever would like to go first, please help yourself.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to jump in with this. I think it is quite a generic one, but I'd just say that try and tailor every single CV that you can to every single job opening, although it's very time consuming. I think from an interviewer point of view, it's very easy to spot when you've just sent out a bulk CV. It really is. And just ensuring that it is all standard, it's short and sweet, and it just gets who you are as a person across quite well.
So one tip I've got for helping that is to mention the name of the company in the personal profile. So you say, I'd be really excited to join the team at ABC Incorporated, because straight away that shows them this CV was written for me.
Mm-hmm. Really good shout.
That's a good idea.
What do you reckon, Jane?
It's a turn off, I suppose. So the immediate thing that's going to make me put a CV on the floor is typos, and I know that's a really basic thing, but you know, taking the time to care. So anything that looks too hurried and just sort of shoved together is going to be dropped on the floor. So really taking your time to check that it's clear, it's set out, that there aren't any typos. Get someone else, get 3 or 4 people to read it through for you to get that check, I think would help. And to echo the point earlier, something that's obviously very generic and not tailored to the vacancy and the company. Again, you just know that someone's probably not that interested in the role, so that's going to put it aside as well. I saw a lovely CV today actually, and again, something I really like. Depends, is something that makes it so clear what your skills are, and maybe a little explanation of each sort of skill area, and summarizing your work history if you've got that available. So I'm not trying to pick it out here and there. You know, summarizing those 2 things can be just super helpful. So what the skill area is, tell me something about what you've done in that particular skill area, and hopefully you've got more than one, you know, so there might be 4, 5, 6 of those. And then something that's a really potted, brief work history, so I can have a look at that as well, skim read that. That's really helpful and helps then promote conversations if you get to interview stage.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. So one of the questions we did actually get which was interesting. If you've been working for a long time, say maybe over 20 years, how much of that do you actually put on your CV, would you say? So
I'm probably the old person, so I'll fall into that bracket. So again, for me, so I've been working for probably, I'm trying to work it out in my head, 26 years. Oh, wow. So again, I will go for that. You can do different approaches, and I will tend to pick out either skills or things that I've delivered, key achievements, and then literally just do a line by line of my work history, but probably not more than 5 or 6 lines. Now that works for me because I've worked for a number of people for a period of time. I'd be very careful, unless you're a contractor, if you've got a work history that's 2 pages long, because that's going to show that you don't really stick around anywhere for a very long time. Even if you've got a 26-year work history, you know, what is your what does it look like in terms of the message it gives out, in terms of how you stay the course in a particular role?
Yeah, that's a really good shout. How do other panelists feel about that? Not that I'm accusing anyone of a particular age or a particular date of anything, but how do you feel about it?
It's again just being, I suppose it all comes back to, again, being specific on the role that you're job specific really to each thing that you go into. So again, the more experience, sometimes, people do write way too much, or sometimes way or not enough. But what they have to just do is each time allocate in simple, plain bullet points, and even use keywords from the job description on your CV. That should naturally stand out, and generally that would almost highlight back to the way that personally we work, to highlight where somebody's CV sort of highlights the right roles, job words that will go with the role, and then we to discuss and get them to elaborate if more so. And what we'd often say to candidates to help them is get them to further elaborate, because some people don't. I think again, it depends job specific what people do, but sometimes they don't elaborate, and technical people sometimes don't. They can just be so just the technical areas, and one area that I needed to highlight, and that we sometimes get, which is where clients will say it's very much an I and there's no we. It doesn't seem like they do much within a team, and it's almost people being just kind of trying to remember to break that up as much as they can. So it's not I. It's, they also incorporate team aspect of it, job every time.
That is a very good point. I have a lot of I's on my CV. I should probably change that.
You need to balance those. I think as well, if you're a technical person, and therefore you might have a stream of names of different technical stuff that you are used to using, you need to break that up. I have seen, I've done a lot of recruitment for software devs, and sometimes it will be 2 or 3 pages of different packages that they've used, but it doesn't break down in terms of what they are and what they've managed to deliver from those and at what standard. So again, try and avoid those sorts of lists of tech I have used at some point. Or break it down into boxes, something I consider myself expert at, something I've used now and again, something I'm just vaguely familiar with, and in what situation. Because I know you want to get it all across and you're excited about all the different tech that you've used, but more than 2 pages and it's just going to turn off the reader.
Actually, that leads us very nicely onto our next question, luckily. So, Matt, what would you say would be your interview pet peeve or cliche that you've had to deal with? Can you think of anything?
I think in tech, there is a tendency for small companies to just robotically follow what they think the big companies are doing for their interview process. So you'll get people hear about whiteboard interviews conducted at Google, and they'll go, oh, well, we should do that. But they don't really have a clear objective in mind about how they're going to do it or what they're going to learn from it. So it effectively, it just screens out people who don't have months to prepare for a whiteboard interview and learn these very theoretical computer science like knowledge bites that will have nothing to do with the job as you're actually doing it. So yeah, I would always consider that a bit of a red flag if an employer is interviewing in a sort of bizarre way that doesn't mirror the job.
I see, that's very interesting. I was almost thinking of it as what interviewees do, but interviewers are kind of not at fault exactly, but they're guilty of sort of doing, like you say, those kind of whiteboard, aren't we, sort of innovative kind of things as well. That's very interesting. Do you guys have any sort of feelings on that? What do you think, Georgie?
I'd probably say from my perspective, thinking from like an interviewee and interviewer, I think that my pet peeve would just probably be like trash interview questions. It's a bit of a weird term, but I think from like an interviewer perspective, it's just like generic questions that do not dig into like the individual. I know you can see sort of things on the CV, but as Michelle said, this is the opportunity within an interview to really find out more around that individual. So if they're just saying stuff like, why should we hire you? I think that's quite a loaded question. So just reframing that approach, just saying like, if you were hired, how do you think that you could help on this project, for example? That's just a better way. It makes the interviewee feel a lot more comfortable. And then I'd probably say from like an interviewee perspective, probably just using like a lot of buzzwords without like no real life application.
Raise the bar and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. Just saying like, I'm amazing at team working. Like, what does that mean? Like, everyone's worked in a team before. If you have a full situational analysis behind that, how you recovered from a certain failure, for example, that's just going to really show yourself as an individual and most likely put yourself into a working scenario.
Well, that's really good. Actually, that's a good point. Michelle, you as a recruiter yourself, what do you find that the people you talk to about getting a job, what sort of cliches or maybe unwise things do you find that they often do in their enthusiasm or just not knowing?
Generally, one of the key areas is please don't waffle. Try and be precise. Just one, and it's true. And sometimes it's what Georgia said there was beautiful. The way what you said then as an interviewee, you made it sound that person as an person getting interviewed, they'd feel like they're already getting welcomed by the company. Just the way of phrasing it, which was brilliant. It's a brilliant sales technique, and like Matt says, there's no point in giving all this wishy-washy about what Google does, but you want to be naturally selling your company to them. But the way that you made that was lovely and welcoming. But it's candidates needing to be precise, and even if they feel like they only give, you're better off almost giving a shorter answer to a question, and then asking the interviewee, would they like you to elaborate on it more, rather than just throwing a lot of. Unfortunately, when we get feedback and they just wasn't direct, they just waffled too much, and I think it's human nature. Sometimes they almost just get quite nervous. And they might not be able to think of the answer, and they just throw as much as they can in, hoping that they get the right answer for the job.
I know these things.
Yeah, that's it. Other kind of one thing that is just me, and this is the basics really, but just punctuality aspect of it. There's just sometimes you almost have to sometimes for every individual take them as if they've never interviewed before sometimes, just because it's just quite upsetting when you know you've got an absolute fantastic candidate or a candidate it depends what they are. Do you know, one person who you think the absolute bee's knees will go in and unfortunately won't get the job, and somebody that you might not have thought was the shining star will get it. But it's just sometimes you just have to remind people to allocate enough time, you know, get there so they're not flustered. So, you know, your punctuality aspect of it, and research, just please research. It's like we're going back to the CV, it doesn't make people seem as if they're keen enough if they haven't done enough research on the company.
That is a very good point.
One tip I have is doing your research on the company, like make some notes about them or maybe print out part of the website and then use colourful pens to like highlight bits, and then make sure you get an excuse to show it to them. Like on a webcam interview, I will literally hold up my notebook and go, I have made some notes on you. Because yeah, you're right. It shows that you've got a keen interest, and they get the impression, oh, this person is very prepared. They've done the homework.
Yeah. And it's funny what you said, Matt. People often think that they need to recite it. And I go, people, they don't expect you to. It's almost quite an old-fashioned view. I'm convinced it is. And I'll go, no, go in with as many pages, you know, fill a book. It's just as long as you've done it. And to be honest, if you do that, that will give you, you know, I think it's no matter what, it will give you more interest into that company. And really, if you get asked a question, you'll feel comfortable throughout.
It also means that if you do get nervous, you can say to them, "Oh, I'm sorry, can I just look at my notes?" And it buys you like a couple of seconds, and your notes hopefully will have useful things. So another really strong recommendation I make is to prepare stories in advance that sell you. So like as Georgie mentioned, having an anecdote about not just I am a good team player, but here is a specific example. There's an interview technique called the STAR technique, situation, task, action, result. And I really highly recommend everyone looks into what that is and prepares a batch of stories. And once you've practiced telling the story a few times, you can probably boil it down to just a few key words that will jog your memory, and have those words written in your notebook next to the relevant competency that you know they're going to want you to prove. And then, if you draw an absolute blank due to nerves, you can say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a bit nervous because I really care about this interview and I really want this job. Can I just look at my notes?"
Oh, that's really good. So you wouldn't be put off by a potential employee that came in with a ream of notes? You wouldn't mind?
I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
Nice. How about you, Jane? You wouldn't feel sort of put off by that or think, "Oh God, what are they bringing in?"
No, as long as you get some eye contact from time to time, I think that's right. But again, to say to Matt, just someone who's looked at the job and the company, I've probably interviewed, I was trying to tot it up last night, probably about 500 people over the last few years. And the percentage of those who haven't even looked up the organisation or the company or about the job is fairly staggering. For me, the key thing in an interview is just be yourself and be your authentic self. And some of the questions I like to ask might be about a situation at work or a thing at work that didn't go well, and how you helped bring that around and what lessons you learned from it. Because you want to bring someone into your organization who can show that they can reflect on things. And I know you want to go in and sell yourself, but we're also trying to learn a bit about you as a person, and someone who can have some self-reflective and learning skills, I think is always going to be welcome in different organizations, rather than no, everything was perfect and it all really went well. That never happens. And just don't be afraid to tell yourself. And if you have any particular issues, or whether, if you're not maybe neurotypical and you need some extra time or some things are difficult, please just flag with us in advance. Again, we want diverse and inclusive teams, and to help us do that, we need to know what we need to do in the interview room to support you in that. Yeah,
definitely. Actually, this leads us very nicely on to the next question, which is, it's like you guys know. As an interviewer and as an interviewee, what kind of questions should be asked to see if you're a good match for your company? So obviously we've talked a little bit about, knowing about the company you're applying for, but could you offer any kind of tips or tricks that would sort of really impress you, when it came to, say, values or their attitude, or just on any scope, really? What do you reckon, Georgie?
I'd probably say from a interviewee perspective, I think it's always good to ask around more of like the longer term plans. So you can just ask from more of like a shorter term perspective, like what are the company's plans for the end of this year? What are the plans for 2 to 5 years? I think that also shows that as an individual, and also reflecting on your CV as well, that you want to be in this role for quite a while. And that in itself is probably a winning point. Something that I've asked, and like just from my personal interest, I like to know what sort of any CSR initiatives that company have been up to. So whether they are supporting the local community, any businesses, that's just something that's very personal to me. And I think it's something that not a lot of people do ask, because it's outside of like the main business goals. So it's just thinking around like the longer term strategy of the business.
Yeah, of course. Michelle, is this a question you get asked a lot from sort of interviewees? What should I ask about this company? What would really impress them if I asked this kind of question?
Do you know, I know it sounds, but it's not as much. It depends. They'll ask what questions, and they'll sometimes run back to us with regards to questions on what shall I cover, and a lot of it would be career progression. What is a good one that you just reminded me of where people before have asked, and almost like, and what I've often turned it back round to a candidate and says, well, what are you also interested in? And exactly what you've just highlighted, and you've had a candidate that have said charity, the environment. So, and that's what I've said. I've said, well, just think about yourself and your own personal interests. I said, because, and more often, and whether it be football or rugby, or I said, because if you sort of discuss that more, you know, companies have like family days, or I said, if you highlight something like that, it's bringing out the personal side of you rather than just the, you know, and that's where people feel more comfortable, isn't it?
Okay, so you feel there's because I think some people worry in interviews it's just about the business, you know, it's business, but do you feel the person needs to kind of shine through as well, not just what you're good at?
Absolutely. You know, you're going to have to feel comfortable with the people and the team that you're working with. You know, we have to be very careful about unconscious biases. I would hate to recruit someone in who you know isn't going to have the same values as the rest of the team. So most of my professional career has either been in the public sector, or now I work for a consultancy that does mainly public sector work. So that motivation of public good really is a key theme. So, you know, and understanding what makes people tick, I think is good. And remember, wherever you are, and I know it's very hard in this current environment, that the employer is just as lucky to get you if you're successful as you are to go for the job. So don't be too afraid to ask some of the difficult questions. And I've maybe made mistakes in the past when I've shied away from asking some questions, particularly as a woman, in terms of, you know, how many women have you got on the board? And if it's not a great stat, what are you doing about it? How do you do in terms of your diversity at the moment? What's working well, what's not? And if there is an area where you want to improve, what that might look like. And I'd be really interested if I was going for an interview now, maybe for a company that usually works in an office, if they've been working remotely over the last few months, what have they done to stay in touch with their staff and look after them? I think that would be a key indicator of whether a company is going to be good for you.
Yeah, definitely.
So don't be afraid to ask those questions. And I quite like it when an interviewee keeps me on my toes, not when they're trying to score points, but when I can see they're trying to work out if we would be a good fit together.
Yeah, of course. It's that old tenet of, you know, you're not just interviewing them, they're interviewing you as well.
Absolutely. Know your worth. That's the main thing. Without bravado, know your worth when you go in.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Matt? Would you shy away from any of the harsh questions that an interviewee might ask?
No. Like, it does show that they're engaging fully. So as well as the questions Jane suggested, also you could ask about who's in the most technical role, like how many women are in technical roles, how long they've been there, have they seen women promoted into technical roles and gain seniority, because that again will show you that they're not just hiring women, but they're actually progressing them and keeping them. So yeah, it's potentially tough questions, but they'll give revealing answers.
Yes. Oh, we've just had a question in from Jess Rutland. Please excuse me. Thank you for your wisdom so far. Do you have any tips for standing out as a research candidate in academia, especially without a lot of past research experience compared to other candidates? That's a good one. Who wants to tackle that one first?
Is that someone looking for a place in academia rather than for a specific job role, or someone coming from academia wanting to start in the workplace?
Yeah, research candidate in academia, especially without a lot of past research experience. Yes, actually, that is a very good point. If you wouldn't mind answering both, that would be amazing. If you have the time. A very easy ask, I'm sure. Yes.
So in terms of making that leap from academia to job workplace, so particularly for us with our user researchers. Obviously, a lot of them come from an academic background. Again, really interested in just the skills that they've used in the way that they've done their research, the topics that they've chosen, and what they're interested in their next steps. But maybe an understanding of, you don't always have the flexibility in a workplace to choose what you might want to do that you do in academia. It can be more closed. So understanding how they might react to that, not having the freedom that you can get in that place. I think we've done a few really successful hires of people making that leap. And I always like to have a really balanced team of people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and people having an academic background. As I say, particularly for us in terms of our user researchers, has really been of value in our team. I haven't done any recruitment in academia, so I wouldn't feel comfortable commenting on that.
No, that's fair. Has anyone else been good at recruiting researchers? Note, I did a research degree. Just going to throw that one out there. Has anyone else hired sort of people more from the academic world, sort of straight in? Or do you find that they need the technical experience? Or are you happy to kind of train them up?
Well, myself personally, naturally, clients come to agencies because they need specialist skills usually. So I've come across a lot of clients, and especially within the public sector, that would then go direct to colleges and the universities and sort of have a bit of a pathway to join them. But yeah, I can't comment, to be honest.
No, that's fair enough.
I know within our organisation we do connect with a lot of local universities, and what we like to give people the opportunity to do is just kind of explain, like, what else have you been doing outside your degree? Because I know that you can have all the technical, all the interpersonal skills, but it's also focusing on those more like softer skills as well, and how they've been applying to different like volunteer opportunities, or like what are you doing outside of that degree, and like just all your research as well. And it's also just another great talking point.
Definitely. I think Jess has clarified previous education and research within that, but wanting to continue work in academia. I see. Does anyone on the panel have sort of experience within academia, or is this going to be unfortunately something we may not be able to answer?
No, but I can try and find out, but it's not my area.
No, thank you very much for that. But I think luckily, we have many other juicy questions for us, and I think this might be one of the sort of the most interesting of what we've got so far. How do we ask questions about discrimination at work? We've been asked about whether being from the UK affects hiring. And from someone who has 7 years experience in working in Europe, they find that it's hard to get employment here. So how do you guys sort of deal with discrimination and kind of make sure it's not applicable to what you guys do? Who'd like to start on that one? Matt, how do you feel?
Sure. I think the tech industry is very focused, almost tunnel vision on tech skills. So I think in the tech industry, they care much less about that kind of thing. I don't think they really need you to have had UK education or UK experience. They're much more likely just to want to see what projects have you contributed to, like have you taken part in any open source projects, or have you gone to hackathons or all that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't think they're going to care which country your certificates are from.
Oh, that's good to know.
For my world, which is public sector, in terms of one thing that can be a problem, so for some jobs we require a high level of security clearance, and for that still involves having resided in the UK for 5 years. So if I was going to take someone onto the team that didn't have that, it does cause difficulties, but that's particular to the public service and some of the services we work on where we have to have certain levels of security clearance. So to help you in terms of you don't want to have your time wasted, maybe that could be one of the questions you can ask up front if you're working either with the public sector or someone who has public sector customers. what's the level of security clearance that's going to be needed. But yeah, I think in lots of ways, maybe in tech, there's some ways we can keep the barriers down. I also asked a friend of mine before I came on, who's another recruiter, a specific recruiter, about maybe asking about diversity. And she was suggesting some ways you might be able to frame a question going in. So I'd ask about their diversity and equality strategies, where they've been successful and where they're striving to get better, and how are they planning on being improving. And make it specific what you want to know about. Is it women in leadership? Is it about BAME representation? Is it about disability representation? Is it about how open their offices are and accessible to people with different disabilities, be they obvious or not obvious? And to not be afraid to ask some of those questions. And I've got to be honest, it's not something I've done in the past, and looking back, I wish I had. So that's going to be something I'm taking on board, even, as someone who does a lot of recruiting at the moment. That's a lesson I'm going to take on board going forward.
No, that's great. It's nice to sort of know that, granted, this may not have been as kind of out there as it is now, but you are learning from that, which is great. Michelle, do you find that the people you recruit are from a very varied background? Do you have like some kind of sort of rules on whether you can get sort of BAME people or certain types of people from different backgrounds into the tech industry?
The hardest thing, and it's always been really frustrating for myself, when you've got very specialist skills, and it's when people are often, it depends on overseas candidates and where they're from. Again, one of the most frustrating is like the sponsorship and the tier 1 and the tier 2, etc. And it always has been, and it still always is, a very hard process for companies to get involved with regards to the tier 1 or tier 2 sort of sponsorship. And it's such a lengthy process that generally I've recruited for 22 years, and I've only really ever come across like 4 companies that have gone ahead and done that. So it just goes to show it's been very frustrating that still you get some absolutely fantastic technical, resumes, people, literally their English is fantastic, and we can't get them the go ahead because they're just not covered to work in the UK.
Oh, that's really frustrating. I suppose that's a much wider conversation, unfortunately. Yeah. For another day, unfortunately. But Georgie, how do you feel that discrimination is being handled sort of now, sort of in this day and age, considering obviously what's happening in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I work for an SME, so there's a lot more like autonomy within the business. I think that within marketing, the issue is that it's super underrepresented, and that's like a shorter and more like a longer term problem, because if the pool of candidates aren't there to recruit from, it is hard. But then the longer term issue is that if people from like less privileged backgrounds, if they're not aware of these sort of opportunities, then you need to get into the education systems. You need to really like make these job openings. Just like you need to let them know at like a younger age that these skills can give you these sort of jobs, and just really provide those opportunities. And I think that is something that businesses should actively be doing, and also encouraging education systems.
Definitely. It's like Michelle said, the companies seem almost reluctant to get involved because the process is so long and arduous and probably expensive, let's be honest. So, which is a bit of a pain. Oh, we have a question. Okay. Thank you for hosting this event, says Kay Britt. I've seen a statistic that women apply to jobs when they meet a higher percentage of the job description than men for a specific job role. How can this be combated? Oh, I've heard of this before. How do you guys feel that we can hopefully do something about this?
I don't think we can we? I think I know it sounds, and it's hard sometimes even going up against this, but you often have to say to people you're you haven't got the skills for the role, and people will sometimes, and I can understand, and it's true. I'm so sympathetic. I always have been, that people want to have a job. We've all got bills to pay, but I think generally men can be more confident that they can do it, and they're more adamant at the end of the day. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's not a lot you can do, really. It always happens, and I admire people sometimes, and the more that it's sometimes a numbers game, isn't it? And the more persistent that you are, I've always covered a vertical over the years, and when I used to cover a vertical, I'd have often the same candidate that would be on my case, and I'd do my best to actually get that candidate a job, because I think, well, God loves a try, and this person deserves a job. They phone up for everything and anything, and I really was. So it's a hard one, but you have to take your hat off to people being confident, really, don't you?
You do. And do you find, in your experience as a recruiter who has over 20 years experience, do you find it's mostly the sort of the male side of the population that would be more, not pushy, but let's say eager?
Well, I don't know if sometimes it's probably so. I have to be honest, it's probably more male than it is females. I think females are a bit more conscious, and you'll go through the job specification, and I can contact them about a job, and they'll almost back down and go, but I haven't done that aspect of it. And I'll be really honest with you, more often than not, they think I'm the fairy godmother. And I can't get everything on the job list, but I'll do my absolute best. But you've got the key factors. So, and then you need to persuade that person, or tell them a bit more that they don't really have to tick everything. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to have to come to you, Matt, as there's the male on our panel. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. A mediocre man will happily just go for whatever opportunity you dangle in front of him. So I definitely urge, like, the women that are trying to get into tech, like, have the confidence of a mediocre man. I think it's important to look at the job description and understand what you're seeing. Like, there'll be a list of criteria, half of them marked essential and half of them marked like desirable.
Yeah.
The whole list is basically a wish list. Like, that is the employer's like absolute wish list, and they hope that the perfect candidate that ticks every box will descend out of the sky on a beam of light and be there. But they recognize that that's not really going to happen. So if you're a woman looking at this list, first of all, the section marked desirable, if you don't tick any of those, don't sweat it. If you do, fantastic, promote that you tick them. But you can basically ignore that half of the list completely and just look at the desirable list. And there I would probably say, if you can confidently tick 50% of them, and if you think you can use transferable skills and say, I haven't done this, but I've done something kind of similar for maybe another 25% of them, I think it's worth sending in an application, because there'll be mediocre men that tick that many and they will submit an application.
No, that's really interesting, because there is a bit of a stereotype, isn't there? But I mean, Jane, do you find that this kind of stereotype kind of fits?
I've got to say it does. So
yeah.
my advice for women out there, again, is just know your worth. And I would actually, someone come to an interview and say, you know, I can do X, Y, and Z. I haven't done these two, but this is my plan of action to get myself up to speed. And they've done some research on that, be it a type of technology or a certain environment. I'm going to give that a huge amount more respect than I am someone who is very cocky. You know, being too cocky at a job interview is a huge turn off. So the other one, yeah. So I think, please, you know your worth. But I still think there is an issue, and I still have it, of imposter syndrome and not knowing your worth in the job workplace for women. And you know, if tailor your CV, put it in. If they still don't think you're the right person, they're not going to invite you to interview. If they invite you to interview, you've got enough. So don't worry about the X, Y, and Z, but maybe think about how you might go about developing those skills or that experience over time, and talk that through as a plan.
Yeah, Georgie, do you find that is sort of a similar thing in your experience? Just, you do have the skill, but it's almost like you don't believe it's enough, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from my personal experience as well, one way that I combated that is that I did join these women in tech communities. They've really helped me. And it's people that you've never met in real life. They could be from the other side of the world, but they're going to have your back. And if you look at this job description, you think, oh, I can't do that. If someone says, like, why can't you do that? And as Jane said, if you have that roadmap in place, that just shows that you're so eager and that you're ambitious within this job role. So even if you don't get it, it may be a knock, but then you'll have the confidence to then continue to apply to these roles, because you'll end up applying to one and then you'll end up progressing with that company.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Jane said, if you get the interview, that in itself is a massive thing. So, we have a question in from Emily, one of our lovely co-founders. This is a very niche question, but if you are pregnant whilst looking for a job, are you required to say it during your interview? Is it likely to lead to potential discrimination? Well, that's an interesting one. Who wants to tackle that one first?
So I can't remember I don't think you have to disclose it, and I can't remember the particular legal position. If you are joining a job and you're already pregnant, then you are not going to be eligible for maternity pay and the maternity situation, because that only clicks in when you have to have worked, I think, at a place, I can't remember if it's 15 or 16 weeks before you become pregnant, before you can click in. So I think that would be right, and the right organisation. I've done it before. We've waited for someone who was pregnant and ready to come back. So it would depend on the organisation, but I'm not aware of anything that says you have to disclose. Obviously, you would probably be going in and at a later date saying, right, I'm 4 or 5 months pregnant. By the way, I'm going to be off in whatever. I would look up what your maternity rights are. So you won't be eligible for maternity pay, but there are other maternity rights in terms of holding your job open for you while you're off.
Yes.
And I'm not sure off the top of my head whether you would be eligible for those or not. You need to do your homework and do a check. And it depends on the organisation as well.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, so we've left probably the juiciest question to the end. How do we negotiate more money?
So
this could either be as a suggestion when you're already in the job and you feel like you should get more money, or just when you have your interview and you feel the money's simply too low. How would you recommend a good way to get more money that you feel you deserve?
So I can talk about a couple of scenarios. So if you have applied for a job and it has a stated salary and you think actually you deserve more, then you're not going to be in a particularly good negotiating place. So I would think carefully before you apply for a job that has an advertised wage range. If your expectation is you can go in for more, I might be qualified to do this amount, but if the job is only this, I'm only going to be paid for this. So that I think is going to restrict you. I personally believe my company doesn't, and I tell them off that jobs should be advertised with a salary range. I think that's really quite important. If they're not, then quite often people will want to look at your existing salary to make you an offer, and then we'll try and lowball you as much as possible based on your existing salary. That happened to me recently, and I refused to give it. I said, no, you tell me what you think I'm worth and what the job is worth. And they pushed me 2 or 3 times, but I just held my ground. And that was a really, really hard thing to do. So I think about that, and it's always easier to negotiate your salary going in. In terms of pay rises while you are in the job, I would think about there's a pre-COVID and a COVID situation. So if you are taking on additional responsibilities and therefore you think you deserve more money, then you need to negotiate from that perspective in terms of what you're now bringing to the role over and above a genuine increase. I think it's much more difficult to do in COVID world. Many companies I know have done a wage freeze or have reduced wages. So I would just be mindful of the company's position at the moment and how strong their financial position is, and it's maybe not the right time to do it. But yeah, I would think if you want to earn more than the advertised salary, that's going to be very difficult to persuade them. If it's an open salary, think about what you think you should be earning for that particular role. And if they really want to do it based on your current salary, you don't have to disclose. You have the option not to do that. So you can think about some different options and way through. I've always been rubbish about it all the way through. I've always acted like I'm just incredibly grateful to be given a job. Try and turn that around in your head. I'm still not very good at that. But again, another thing, if you can do it, if you've got friends who would be open, is talk to them about their salaries, because it's one thing, particularly as a British people, we are rubbish about being open and talking about. So you can sort of benchmark, and there are lots of benchmarking tools online as well that you can use. Have an argument as to why.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that you should never ask for less than 10% more, I think. How do you feel about that, Matt? Do you feel that that is in any way valid?
More than 10% more of your current?
More than 10% of your current wage, yes, if you're going into a new job that doesn't disclose how much they're going to pay.
I mean, I guess if you're staying in the same industry and the same kind of role, that would make sense. But I mean, there are lots of other factors that might come into play, and especially in the COVID world, you might be working in a fairly toxic environment and be happy to take a slight cut to work somewhere that was like more sociable and ethical. But yeah, certainly when it comes to negotiating salaries, if you're currently in a job, that gives you a much stronger negotiating position to be in, because you can say to them, here is the salary that I'm going to say I'm earning, and maybe you inflate that. It's probably a good idea too. And then if they don't like it, you've still got your job. You can stay in it and apply somewhere else. If you're negotiating inside your current role, a technique I learned about recently is a brag doc. So keep a document of all the good things you do at work. Like every time you go the extra mile. So maybe it's a notebook, maybe it's just like a file open somewhere. But then when it comes time to speak to your manager, you can say, hey, look, here are all these excellent things I'm doing. If you have a formal review process, instead of staring at a blank screen and thinking, oh, what did I do? You can just open up the brag doc and start typing. It's very powerful.
Really good. Yeah, that is a really good idea. Yeah. How do you feel, Michelle, as like a recruiter? Do you try and prep people that you recruit to sort of fight for more money, or do you sort of provide that because you are the recruiter, or does it vary kind of job by job?
It varies job by job. The thing is, we'll always submit candidates within a salary that we've discussed with them. We've allocated, generally we've covered all boundaries with regards to you will accept that. There's nothing more frustrating when a candidate comes back, when a client comes back and offers, and then a candidate's decided that they're going to be more worth. That's a horrible situation to be in, and it shouldn't really happen. So we make sure that we cover every sort of avenue. The only aspect that would change naturally with regards to if we do have to go back and negotiate is a counter offer from their existing company, or they've got a number of opportunities on the table where they've been offered a number of opportunities. So that generally would be the only time that we would then go back to a client when we've put them forward for a role to discuss any sort of change in the salary that we originally submitted them on. And then training, getting an increase on their own salary. One other thing on that as well, though, it is quite tough, and you get a lot of clients now, especially the tech market, and I suppose specific areas within tech. Some of them are under so much demand that they really are demanding a lot of money, and then we'll have a lot of clients that will sometimes say, I don't want the jobs advertised. So I understand where you're coming from as well, Jane, because you probably get then a lot. If you're advertising yourself, you get a lot of candidates, so you're having to do so much more legwork. But some clients will say to us, we don't want the jobs advertised, the salary, for the simple reason that somebody might be on a 40,000 and it's advertised up to 55 and they want 55, don't they? So they're giving themselves a nice pay increase, you know. So a lot of clients will often say to us, we don't want it advertised, can you just but the thing is, that's our job, and we're happy to go out and do that at the end of the day. And when candidates are deciding and I'll often just highlight to a candidate and say, you like you say, Jane, you don't have to disclose, but they will need a P45 off you once you're starting, so they will know what you are on. So I can understand everybody wants to give you, if you want to give yourself a pay increase, that's fine. That's often why people leave, but they will know what you were originally on. So we have a complete breakdown of the bonuses that they were earning, or etc., etc.
That is a very good point. So how would say a potential person getting a job through you, could they negotiate with you as the recruiter to get more money, but then would you then have to relate that back, I suppose, to the employer?
To be honest, we'd be pretty transparent and say, yeah, no matter what. And then you've sometimes got candidates that it's unbelievable how low they are on as well. And then you can go back and really say, but this person is worth this. Just to try to educate. It depends what client you're dealing with and what role they're recruiting for. Some will understand the market value, but some you could say they really are on a low salary and now they're going out to market. I can put them across to 3 clients and they will get that sort of pay increase because they should be on that additional sort of money. So it's just keeping it all within market rate. And
no, that's fair. Georgie, do you have anything to do with wages, or are you lucky and don't have to worry about it, or are you are more of a negotiator yourself?
Luckily, I don't have to do too much with it. But from an internal perspective, I think just ensuring that you have a clear path of progression. I think that every company should do that in order to keep your staff super motivated. And then also within the interview process, that's something you can brag about. And then going back to what Matt was saying earlier, having a bragging document is amazing because you can forget about what you do every single day. And there's loads of different platforms out there from a company point of view. I know of one called 15.5, and you can fill that out every single week. So you don't even have to have a document, for example. So then when you get around to the big review process, and everything's just outlined there for your manager and yourself. So yeah, I'd probably say that just showing what skills that you have, show how that can be applied to the job role, and then just see if the monetary value is really negotiable.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, we have a couple more questions, which is lucky. Thank you, guys. We have basically gone through our, what I'd like to call official questions. Thank you so much. But we just have a couple more if you're happy for me to just read these out to you, very professional-like. So the next one, also from K-Brit, thank you. What are some non-monetary incentives that could be raised in a tech interview? For example, gym memberships, pension contributions, health and life insurance. So what kind of monetary incentives can you guys offer to, I suppose, almost sweeten the deal for the people you hire, as well as, sort of you as well?
So, well, if anyone ever wants to apply at Methods, we offer all of those. So it's a full package, but generally those are decided at a corporate level. But yeah, it's worth doing your sums. I would say sometimes, though, people get offered, rather than a good salary, they might get offered something that you might not choose to use. So be careful how that's dressed up. I would really look at some of the boring things now, I would say, as an older person. Pension, what the pension arrangements are, what the sick pay is, what if they've got health insurance, and the devil is in the detail on those. And I would really start paying attention, because actually the worth of a good pension is probably an extra 10, 20 grand on the salary that's advertised. So it's really important looking at the overall package, and not just the salary that's attached to it, in terms of understanding what the value is to you.
Yeah, that is a very good shout, definitely. Georgie, did you know your company, do they sort of offer these incentives that could kind of be raised in an interview, and how would you ask about it if it doesn't necessarily say?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're well in your right to ask, aren't you? Because at the end of the day, these are like the USPs of the company. And I know, as we've said before, the company needs to sell itself to the employee. And I also think if there are some non-monetary incentives that at current the company aren't investing in, can you put a business case together and say maybe like discount from like childcare, for example? Because I know that is a huge hindrance for a lot of like women going into certain roles. So just really putting that business case together and just saying, this is how it would benefit X amounts of members of the team, for example. And I don't know what the harm in asking is at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, putting a case together for it, that's actually a really good idea, because like you say, with childcare and, when you have a full-time job, how invaluable will that be? So I suppose I can only say no. Matt, would you mind if somebody sort of came up to you and asked for something like this in their interview or when they were hired?
I mean, again, it's corporate level stuff. So
yeah, of course.
It goes, there's a central HR function that provides that kind of thing. But companies do want to be seen to be responsive and caring for their employees. So something like childcare arrangements might well be easier to push through than you might think. Something not mentioned on the list would be like a learning and development budget.
Yes, I was going to ask about that, actually.
Both monetary and time-wise. Like the company might make a deal and say you get X hours per week or like X days per month where you don't do your job, you just concentrate on learning. And tech being an industry where you constantly have to learn the next thing, that's a really valuable incentive.
Of course, it never stops, does it? So to know that your company cares enough to sort of put you through that, that's really good. So, thank you guys for that. Okay, we have, I believe, one final question from Jess Rutland. She says, this has been incredibly useful. Thank you all. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Our last question. Would a candidate with a lot of tattoos and unnatural hair colour be off-putting at the interview stage? That's a very interesting question. Right. Michelle, what do you think as the recruiter when you get your first sort of experience and they have, loads of flipping tattoos and got blue hair, and would that put you off at all?
No, not this day and age. Again, it's going to, even this day and age, I can't even imagine where we're being job specific. I suppose still maybe some of your financials but again, I wouldn't want to, I think we're so modern this day and age that I think it doesn't come, and if we're specifically to tech, it's are what they are. It comes down to how good they are with regards to the job and the right attitude to be able to do the role, not what they look like.
Of course, yeah, because like you said earlier, Matt, it doesn't, you're very blinkered. It's about, do you agree that with this it's similar? It's about the skills. It doesn't matter anything about what they look like.
There's maybe an argument to be made for it being a plus, like stick a hoodie on top of the bright hair and tattoos and you look like a stereotypical genius, so it could count in your favor.
That's actually a very good point. Your stereotypical sort of coder, definitely. What about you, Jane? How do you feel about tattoos and funny hair color?
Again, I think it's almost compulsory. I would say it's the opposite. I work in, again, particularly in the public sector where I've been for the last 20 years. I think it's a bit different from where I am now, corporately wise. Try not to have a swear word written across your knuckles or your forehead. That might restrict you in certain roles. But other than that, no. We want nice, diverse teams. I'm more interested if someone's going to give a smile and say hello and, within reason, give eye contact. It's all that sort of thing, more than anything else. So no, most tech environments, I would say nowadays, are very, very welcoming to you as you are.
Yeah, I do have that experience. What about you, Georgie? Do you feel that's the same with where you work? People are very colourful, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, definitely. I think that just echoing what everyone says, it is welcomed and it shows the personality behind the person. And yeah, as well, it's like it's something to talk about, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think we might be able to call it a day now. My gosh, this hour has gone really quickly. I just want to thank you guys so much for basically giving your time for us, because this has been so helpful. I myself have recently been made redundant, so this has been really helpful. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry I'm going to have to do it. Please follow us on social media. Please follow us on Twitter. I've been told to say this, I promise. Yeah, you can see the clever banner there, please, if you can, and we'll keep you up to date with everything, our newsletter as well. And yeah, but thank you guys so much for this. And it could not have gone any better. I was really worried that I'd freeze up or technical issues, or my cat would just get in the way. But yeah, I think I can say to our lovely producer that we are all sorted. Any final thoughts from you guys about women in tech and how for us just to get that job or to make that CV that little bit better?
I promised someone I would mention the West Midlands Combined Authority, which is based in Brum, has just put out a load of great looking tech roles. So please take a look. I've asked Women in Tech Twitter account to retweet. But for anyone looking now, I'm not affiliated anyway. They're just a lovely team. That's a public sector team. Go and check out. I think they've got about 10 roles. So that would be a good thing to look at. My DMs are open on Twitter if anyone's looking for, we don't have any roles at the moment, but general advice as a woman in tech. Very happy to support people in the region. So don't be afraid to reach out. But thank you for inviting us today.
Yes, thank you so much. Final thought from anyone?
Be confident, be yourself, and just do as much as you can. And again, people can reach out and ask for any advice. We've been at Woodrow Mercer, we've been doing a number of these webinars and helping as many people as we can. So please just get in touch. And it's brilliant that you're flagging up women in tech. I love it.
Thank you guys so much for being part of this. And I can imagine that I'm sorry, you're probably going to get a lot more DMs now, hopefully anyway. So thank you guys so much. And Zoz, I think we are good to go. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye all. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.